Welcome, all of you. So I imagine that hearing Steve, you said, yes, 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 that's precisely that. That's exactly what I want to transmit and channel to all of you. Now you have everything that you will be asking for is you have to say, yes, ma'am, or yes, lady. It gets my attention in an industry where we have very few women. The big representation of women that have this function of attracting talent, which is talent versus HR. We're going to do this other modality in which we are going to ask three questions, and we will give 3 to 5 minutes approximately, and then we will do a general talk where we will include Steve. What are the main changes of mindset in people and the new strategies or tools for hiring and retention that you have implemented with success? If there are differences in white collar and blue collar, as we approach the changes, we have accelerated the need to acquire new skills and update the existing skills. How has training and development for those skills changed? And what challenges and problems are we not having an answer for yet? So 6 minutes, it seems like a Q&A section, right? I don't remember who was first. No, we didn't decide that yet. Oh, okay. I can start. Okay, Flavia. Go ahead, please. Well, first of all, good morning. I'm very happy to be here face to face. I'm going to speak Portuguese if you allow me, if you all understand. Yes? So, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm very happy to be here with you. And Steve made a great job because he did a great job because he helped us greatly with his presentation. Thank you, Steve. And so, answering to your first question, I think that something that changed and we are seeing more and more, and also Steve mentioned, is the search for talent of big professionals and what they do for the companies that connect with an individual purpose and their individual values. And we are at this company because we believe in it and we have a very good relationship with people and we have a good relationship in general. Something we've done is investing our time in selective in individuals and collectives. Who is who? What's our vision, our purpose, our culture? The individual processes. We include senior leaders participating in this process because we understand that you can have the or tell the company history, the vision, the purpose, our practices every day. And we also develop pairs besides the leaders that they're hiring. So our premise is a selection process that happens at several places at the same time as the company chooses the people they want to collaborate with at the same time as people choose who they want to spend their time with, and that's how we visualize. But that selection process, we have a training course in Brazil with 200 spots. We invest a lot of time telling the audience what the company is, what our connection is with the different challenges, social challenges, and we had 40,000 people enrolled for the different places we had. So it was a success to see how our narrative can be very attractive when we are involved and we talk and tell each other. Change that you mentioned and the way that we develop. An example I can give you is the leader's role to develop people. So, someone mentioned that a leader needs to be investing 50% of their time developing people, and that is a belief of ours as well. And so, we prepare our leaders to do that. In the past, we used to have an NPS indicator, which is the one that we have for our clients too, where we do the developing leader, and every 10 months collaborators need to answer a question, and that involves how do I recommend our leader and as someone who develops me. And that's our indicator to know if we are doing a good job for development. And it's not development between professor and collaborator, but on the other hand, it's an environment of psychological security and an openness, so that the person who is being led brings their concerns, their views, and their questions. And so the leader is receiving that with empathy, as it was mentioned, with openness, with a genuine listening, so that they can develop other people by making or by asking powerful questions or by formal training sessions. So that is our big bet besides the formal means of development, so that we can continue establishing big and strong connections with people with their talent and being leaders who are more and more prepared, because we are finding that future. We know and that in the future we don't just have the soft skills but the smart skills as well. We call them soft because it seems to be easy, but the truth is that smart skills are something difficult that we need to learn, and that distinguishes us from others. Why do those challenges not have a solution yet? Well, I think two things, and they were mentioned yesterday. Security. How are we going to become companies that are safer every time? And the leadership has a special role in that sense. So that's a topic that I believe we need to develop more. We have that challenge. And the other thing is that with everything we saw, the expectation that people are staying less in the company, how can we accelerate the technical knowledge management, which is so important for our industry? Those are the aspects I wanted to mention. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Paula. Good morning. I'm Paula. I'm very happy to be here. I'm thankful for Jefferson, Jorge, and the CEOs for giving me the chance to represent the company. I salute my colleagues here and every colleague in the industry, competitors, vendors, and clients who are so important for competitivity and excellence in our sector. So I had the chance to be here at Alacero in Buenos Aires in this live forum pre-pandemic in 2019, and I remember we had a small slot to tell about the strategy on digital transformation. And when we brought the vision that ArcelorMittal had at the time, and I'm talking about 3 years ago, we used to have from all of the uncertainties one clarity, and I am giving or I'm asking for a political license. I have been in Portuguese, but we have the clarity that people are in the center of that transformation. So we started studying the signals, the whys to those changes, and there those are changes that were happening and might still be happening, because before we went out to copy, and we do that a lot. We copy paste, and we do the benchmarking, we share the practices, but before thinking about what we were going to do, it's why changing, because changing is hard. Our brains are not programmed to change. Changing requires energy. And why are we going to change? Because we were doing really good. And we had a lot of discussions, and maybe Jefferson can remember that those 100 years of a company with lots of success, but it's not a guarantee for the future. So we started understanding, as Steve said, people knew that they were being empowered, they had the power to choose, and they wanted to assume more risks in pro of more exciting and challenging experiences that were done. They were exhausted from the command of control. And you saying, oh, we need to reduce 10% of the cost, that doesn't motivate anyone. That is a part. We need to do that because competitivity is essential for our industry, for the business, but that's not enough. So people don't want to be bossed around, they want to be challenged. People want to take part of a company. They want to converge with their own purpose, and we don't follow leaders. We follow the principles and values that are represented by that leader. So we have a core or a person centric strategy, and that's not simple, but it started with a vision. I remember Jefferson going with us and seeing those innovation systems, and after understanding that the world was changing so fast with startups and with a very strong drive that we want to be better, that is very strong in this company. We understood that we needed to do something different. It's what said, like the Innova BC at the time in our blueprint plan. But what is behind that? Well, behind that is our culture. Culture for us is like the marketing at the 60s or 70s, the new discipline of management. And that's very different from being a destination or an endpoint. It's actually the pathway. It's not like you do the project, you transform the culture, and that's it. Culture is the way in which a leader, like Mr. Mito, has to lead 190,000 people in the world, telling them what their way of being is, what their principles and cultures that are not in the wall. They're being revealed and interpreted by people when leaders make decisions. So that day, which for us was not a transformation, is being, and I'm using the continuous tense because it's continuous. It has a cultural background because some elements brought a robust history of driving for approval, this performance excellence, that confidence as a value. That was always a tradition in our company, and that all needed to be revitalized by new times, for new generations, and for the quest or the search of people that, as Steve was saying before, to be learners, right? People liking to learn, because we're not talking about generations, but we're talking about mindsets. We have a lot of ArcelorMittal apprentices from 55 years, that attitude, the humbleness of saying that we don't know everything. And that's part of our culture: collaboration, breaking our threads. Our company, and I can credit that some of you identify as base industries, they were very mechanical traditionally. So pragmatism is right, no, wrong. You cannot, you can. That binary thinking is limiting to a world which at Alacero 2019, I was telling you, it's Vani. It used to be VUCA. It used to be volatile, complex, and ambiguous. Today is fragile, non-linear, inunderstandable, incomprehensible, and besides VUCA, which was coined in the Cold War. So if a world is Vani, and that world dynamic is gestated during the pandemic, so that we can understand the world dynamic that is going to affect us, it demands a different mindset and other competencies. So that fragility demands, as he said, fragility. It's not resilient towards steel because we're in a crisis and we cannot go back. We need to improve. We need to learn something from it. So that complexity is anxiety. That anxiety from that connection that was very well explained by Steve. The mindfulness. How do I connect with myself? How can I connect with you or the company if I'm not connected with myself? And we are hyper connected and distracted and taken farther away. And so the journey starts with the self. Non-compensability reads or needs context reading, because we're going to use commas and the exact same spots, but we need to have adaptability and context reading, and understandability gives us demand for transparency, for data driven, and intuition for other abilities or other skills. So for us, Eduardo, I can cite or quote different practices, but in a more practical way, the fact of being or taking care of a company is a reflection of an organization that is being ambidextrous. So they're understanding that besides managing the present and having the best operational presence, the better costs, it demands a certain specific time of, repetition. You want to go around the clock that Steve showed. It demands a mindset to create a future. It requires a humbleness, intuition, art, creativity, intuition. It was not a part of the organizational world, at least not the metal world originally. So those seem to be antagonists, but you know, including the E, and understanding that we need to you need to have both sides to manage the present and kill some elements in the past, so that the hardest thing is not learning but unlearning, and at the same time creating a future. So we are in this dynamic with very countless practices and people in the innovation area working hand in hand, because that is a challenge for organizations. Breaking the threads and understanding that these problems are transversal and we need more dialogue, more understanding. And maybe if we answer the last question, we are full of doubts. We have a lot of questions, and maybe our role is to ask better questions to stimulate that creativity that Steve was mentioning before. Thank you, Paola. That's fascinating. I think over here you're preaching to the choir, but we have a challenge of upgrading our mindset, or updating our mindset. So, Milena, what can you tell us? Yes, absolutely, because afterwards, we have a lot of information and things that we can think of. Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much. I'm going to speak Spanish, but if I'm missing vocabulary, I will switch to Portuguese. So, well, just a little bit of reflection on that with my colleagues here. Maybe with all these mindset changes, that's the first point. It's happening across the board. And so, as organizations, maybe our job is to select what makes more sense to us in our organization. Because the pressure for topics and things like that leads us to a split attention context. So if we start there, our transformation actually started before the pandemic in 2019. And a topic that I would like to focus on is productive learning. Why that? Because a change of mindset is a bit more transversal. We have a very strong relationship with our cultural transformation in Raleigh, because people and the approach that we're having about changing our mindset on how we are learning so that we can transform is very strong. So the essence of every change that is happening in the company is such that our theme for transformation is learning together, and together with a very strong approach.
So, what we observed before and during the pandemic is that close to 21% of employees, and the numbers are not different from the global surveys that from what we have internally, but 21% of the employees believe that learning can be in a formal classroom. So if we think that 79% of the people understand that learning comes from different platforms, from different ways of learning, then we can see a very significant change and very important change there. So together with that, another important information is that 68% of people love learning with their colleagues. And this is not a blue collar, white collar executives, it's about everyone. And this is a social learning that takes a main part of our story. Maybe we have never thought about this, but it's a huge amount of people that believe and they recognize that we are learning here right now. But what are we going to do with the content that we're learning here? And what are we going to communicate or convey later? That's what's most important. And maybe going back to Paula's statement, who is in control? Who has the driving seat of learning? So this is why we need a change of mindset, because it's not many organizations who produce contents and structures and volume different from others. So people are the most important. So when we talk about putting the people at the core, which is a very important element, is it really that we're placing people within the center? So, when we talk about productive learning, change is basically leaving the world of participation and the world of creating solutions for people behind, and we need to create a world of more specific solutions. We need to leave behind the mindset of the creation of structures or complex knowledge, and teaching new skills and new learnings, and we need to change it to a world of teaching to learn. So that demands a lot of flexibility from us. Like no one taking control, which is contrary to the Brazilian culture and most of the Latin American culture as well. So the question is, how much are we understanding that we need to leave behind, we need to let everything flow, and that it's in the hands of the executives of our organizations, because it's not going to be controlling absolutely everything. We're going to get to a point of change, whatever the change it might be for the organization. So, this is a situation for us of leaving the world behind, of participation, of volume, of control, and change it for a world where learning belongs to people. They're going to know when, where, and how they're going to learn. Why all of this is important for all of us? Because when we start with these changes in technology and these cycles, they're getting shorter and shorter. So let's imagine that we're going to choose a technology for the industry that we're in, and that this is going to happen for 10 years. That doesn't happen anymore. So, how are we going to build a learning structure that is working precisely with a different timing? We need to teach to learn together with the people who is going to build this learning environment, and we need to bring the people who are going to be learning with whatever they are going to learn. So this method speaks with the learning environment that we're going to be using. When we think about attracting people and retaining people, the reflection that we do internally is, how are we going to create the environment of creating and retaining people? Because the challenges that we have as an industry are the same. We need to attract people, we need to have diversity, those are the same ones. But creating the environment so that people feel connected, as Flavia mentioned, is more important and is even more challenging than any other thing. So here, this productive learning for us speaks about the transformation that we need to have to reinvent. And we need to find an acupuncture point to impact our culture. And this is why learning together is a very important element. Good, and that's very interesting, Milena. And I'm going to take a quote of what you mentioned, like customized solutions. It's always helpful to have these type of analogies. Marketing is 20 years ahead of talent and human resources. If in 40 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, they just created one black car, and now we are doing it like the client requests it, and now we have hyper customization, and we want to have policies for everyone, equal for everyone, and like Tuesdays and Thursdays, we all come to the office. And I think that you highlighted that situation. We need to learn together these policies, these customized policies based on everyone's needs. So this is a huge challenge. Now, Silvia, good morning, everyone, and thanks for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be talking with all of you about all these topics because talking about the strategy of talent is talking about rethinking and having this permanent mindset. I think the pandemic accelerated the process that we started to see at the beginning, and I believe that we all were in recalculating mode in our GPSs to know exactly where we want to live, what do we want to do if we really want to live working all the time. So this is a huge transformation in terms of the workforce. This is a transformation I believe that most of us don't really understand yet. This is a whole phenomenon that we thought it only belonged to the new generations. I think it is part of the new generation, but it transcends to the older generations as well. They are trying to question these things. So if we take into account, as Steve said, that people choose where to work, who to work with, and how to work, then I would add how long they're going to be working for a company. They decide that. And this takes us to a rethinking situation if we still need to be thinking about retention. It's like we want to have hostages inside our companies. I think that the idea is to keep the talent. If that's what we want, we need to take care of it because we care about it. I was reading a survey not so long ago, and when they asked people what they want, 82% of the people said, we want the companies to treat us as people. And that's very harsh because we ask ourselves, weren't we treating people, as humans? And at this point, I would like to take you to a practice, what we're doing today. If we're not suffering from a turnover, high levels of quitting, there has been a low level of turnover. Well, it was before, it has increased a little bit, but we need to try to understand every time we retain a person in a company, if we want to keep that person, we need to try to ask the questions of what is this person looking for that we're not giving it to them. And sometimes they're not even looking for something. Some time ago, I was interviewing a very famous person and I was trying to find the right statements to keep that person. And at the moment of a conversation, this person said, don't worry, I'm going to come back. The thing is that I need to go outside. I need to find different experiences. I need to have an international experience. I need to find new things and new learnings. But don't worry, I'll come back. And I was thinking about this change, about building relationships. What does it mean, having a long-term relationship? Maybe it's not just to retain people in a company. It's about thinking if we are capable of having a magnetic culture that attracts people and be a place where they want to work. And somehow they come back one day. And I think this is an important point. Something important as well is that nowadays it's difficult to understand this, but in our industrial language, sometimes we say that the talents that we have, the long list of things that we have that they expect from our companies, become high maintenance people. They need a close leadership. They want their leader to customize or to know exactly what they want. So we need to work in different models. And in that sense, I believe that this is a very strong change. And the main characters of this is related to the characters and to the organizational cultures. The main characters are the leaders, and they need to detect these things and they need to shape culture, because we believe that the culture is what we created 100 years ago, what our founders put into our values and we embraced them, and that's it. But culture is shaped the same way we are adapted to the pandemic and the same way we were able to be competitive. We also need to work on competitiveness and the advantage of competitiveness inside our culture. So, in terms of learning, just to add something to what my colleagues were saying, there is also a change in our mindsets that is related to how we are moving to a model of training where we associate learning to courses, to going to a different learning model. Before the pandemic, we created our corporate university because we felt the need of a transformational process that we started since 2018, and we had the need of not only giving knowledge but also creating practice communities, being able to work in multicultural environments, creating corporate networks to strengthen everything that is related to technological knowledge. And this university that we created before the pandemic was a huge challenge for us because in a few time we had to digitalize 80% of the content because we were already in the pandemic and our collaborators were in lockdown, and we couldn't just not support the new way of working to develop their competences. So I believe that the great change, this new human deal, this new complexity of the workforce that we are trying to understand every day, sometimes we make it even more complex than it is. People leave because they want to live different experiences. So at some point I think that we need to work in that sense, and leaders should go back to student mode. We are working in leadership programs from the first people to the first time leaders. So we need to work together with them in a training process, and we need to train the leaders as well. They need to develop the competences. They need to be humble enough to say I don't know how to handle this situation. I don't know how to keep these talents in this new context. That's a call to attention. Because I was listening to you and I was thinking, who does this challenge belong to? It's yours. It belongs to you because people go to and they choose a job, choosing a company, but they leave because of the boss, because of the head. So what I'm hearing here is that you are responsible for creating a continuous learning in an environment. And it's being able to say, you know what, I need help to do that. How would you do it? And in this panel, the important people are not on the stage. They're sitting over there, right where you are. We would have to turn on the lights to see each other. So if you don't think about this, when people ask you, how are you doing? I haven't asked you, how are you doing at home in a while? What are your objectives? How are you doing at home and your life? As Paula said, we need to change ourselves first. What am I going through? What am I facing? How am I feeling? And now we're going to Pablo. What else do you have to add? Well, I have just a few things to add. Eduardo, Steve, colleagues, thank you so much for being here today, and thanks to the audience who's listening to us. In the Acero, well, I'm going to put you in context. We are going through our second transformation process, our second institutional process. We started 5 years ago, our first one, and we just renewed our vision towards 2026. Now, this transformation process, to be able to see it in a collective way, we need to start from the individual. Because the thing that ends up transforming in an organization is people. And we add the mindset in our strategic enabling process. We are working with the heart set. We are working in parallel. And the mindset is important in the leadership team and in the collaborators, and the heart set as well. Because first, we are enabling the hearts of the people, and then we enable the minds of the people. So it's very difficult to change the minds of the people or take them to new stages of change when in their hearts they have a lot of burdens and a lot of things that we don't know about. And the CEOs or whoever ignore what the people are feeling. So, in the best of cases, we have one leader, they have 4 or 5 people in charge, and in these companies we have around 80. So how are we pretending to control or to manage an organization when there's a person who has 80 people in charge and they don't know what's in their hearts? Maybe they don't even know their names. So when we go into an individual transformation process, we are combining two things in a comprehensive development model, and we are working on two main premises. The first one is, how do I recognize myself? How am I going to recognize myself as a person? Not like recognize as we know it, like recognize in terms of who I am, in terms of my vulnerabilities, in terms of my fears, my phobias, my constraints. And this is going beyond just thinking about the 8 or 10 hours that I'm working. How am I going to recognize myself to change from the heart to the brain or to the mind, to have a complete change? And how am I going to start to recognize you? To be able to recognize another person, we need to have a model, and we need to know that this is a human being. It's not just a professional. This stage of a professional is just the face that he or she uses to go to an office. But this is a very fragmented part of their being. And to be able to recognize the person that we have in front of us and to enable their heart set, we need to connect to that person, and we need to know their burdens, their fears, their phobias, what's happening at home. They probably have a sick child. They're probably getting through a divorce. Maybe their parent is dying or it's in the last stages of life. And we're dealing or handling people with the mindset that, oh, I see him or her being happy and that's it. You just have these communication tools and leadership tools, and you have, and the learning capacity is completely different. But what we want is to have people with the higher level of capacity to learn. And the mindset is going to be towards a learning mode of incorporating tools into my toolbox to do things differently. But if I leave aside the heart, then this learning is going to be completely difficult. So we start from the individual, and within the mindset and the heart set, we try to enable our collaborators to understand what the word responsibility means, and not about accountability, but in the sense of ability to respond. And in terms of the loop of insecurities that we are getting from everywhere, how am I going to respond to what's happening to me? I think that there's a paradigm here, and the surveys from Gallup and from other companies talk about the collaborators leaving the leaders of a company rather than a company itself. If you quit and you victimize yourself because you didn't have a good boss, then you are leaving aside a great opportunity to learn. Because what's the probability of having a super boss, a great boss, in the area where you think the grass is greener? Nowhere. We are not going to have that anywhere, because we are only working on the mindset and we're not working in our heart set. So our development goes in that sense. We don't have any distinction between the blue colors and the white colors because the mindset and the heart set is the same thing. The distinction that we have is through the media that we're using with the appropriate languages and with the appropriate technologies to be able to influence the heart first, and through the heart influence the minds of the people. And that is a real individual transformation. And through that transformation, we are going to go to the collective that we are talking about today. That is very inspiring. That focus on the individual, on the person, on the heart of the person. That focus on the being, which is a comprehensive being. I always say that my dream is to make organization as human as each one of the persons that work within it, with the enthusiasm, with the everything that it entails, instead of just focusing on the professionalism of our jobs. Steve, has estado escuchando muy atentamente. ¿Cuál es tu primera reacción acerca?
Share it with you.
My first reaction is I think we need a new language for work. I think the new name for a business should become business school. That every business has to be in the teaching, and this is owned by every leader, as my colleagues have said. And also, I think it's a different way of relating to people. We've been taught that you don't talk about your personal life at work. How can you get to the heart if you don't know who someone is? And I think this is the moment the pandemic has served us. The first question we ask our colleagues is not, okay, how's the status of the project? Is, how are you? How are you? And that moment, I hope that we can learn from in the pandemic to really leverage dealing with humans. But using words like digital transformation, I mean, just think of those words that we use with our employees. We're going to go through a digital transformation. When you hear those two words, what do you picture? A beautiful sunset or a little puppy dog? No, you picture cold, inhuman, robotic, steel. That's the words we're using. So we're alienating, we're causing fear. And I don't know what the right words are, but I think we all need to come up with more welcoming language that doesn't scare people.
Es interesante porque veíamos esta mañana el poder del lenguaje para transmitir una idea, si de nearshore.
Message. If we talk about friendly shoring instead of near shoring, I think that's going to be better. And this is a new way of doing things. We should stop or forbid talking about human resources, and we need to find it a better name, starting by there. May I say something in that sense? Well, we changed the name to the area. It's the people area, like 3 or 4 years ago. And Gustavo mentioned narrative. For me, something that comes before thinking about words is thinking about what we want, what every organization wants in their own reality, and understanding that context. They need to look at their challenges and they need to know, where do we want to go? How are we going to do that? This is like a locomotion, which is the strategy of the business. And it was mentioned yesterday. Where are we standing? Where do we want to go? What do we need to get there? And we need to be moved by the understanding that this moves the business. And this path needs to be real. And the narrative is a consequence, because the difference with marketing, where you were doing an analogy, marketing works with image, with positioning, with how do we want to be perceived, how do we want to be seen. But in an internal look from the inside out, like culture, is not related to appearance, it's related to essence. So we need to know, how do we want to be, which is going to allow us to be relevant for our different stakeholders. And we need to remember that one of the paradigms that is being broken in a higher context, when it's born with force, is the ESG or EESG, because we cannot just have the environmental, social, and governance. It's also about the organizational objective of the company, as Milton said when he won the economy Nobel Prize. He said that the best thing for a company was to generate money for their colleagues or their people. But I mean, I think it's not incomplete. And Cayetana mentioned about the mission as citizens, but besides this task, as we have as companies, we have been here for centuries, and these mandates in the government are here only for 4 years. So, as organizations, we need to perceive the impact power that a stakeholder has in an organization or in a society as a company that is 100 years old, and we shouldn't just stare at these things. We should need to understand them. We need to leader them because we see value in transformation and we know that it generates value for the stakeholders as well. We need to create happier people, and we just don't need to retain people and lock the door, not letting everyone out. No, we need to generate the right environment. I want people to choose me, right? And that's very common, Sylvia. They say, no, I don't want to be here right now, but I'll be back. And Sophia, our people director, has been here 3 or 4 times here. And it's not, oh, she betrayed us because she left. No, she's going to come back because she chose us. And this is what Steve said. We need to support their careers. And this is the social part. It starts from home, of course, like charity. And we need to reestablish some basic principles. And sometimes it might seem obvious. We need to learn about people, listen to them, hear their hearts. But when we know this, they say, oh, this is about respect. And that's the greatest thing we can think of. No, that's not the only thing that we can think of. And when we talk about these, sometimes we think that there's no sophistication behind leadership and that we should just treat people well. But people are not going to tolerate if they don't like things anymore. In the past, maybe there was a higher level of tolerance because we put in the balance many things and we said, okay, well, this job is going to bring me these benefits and I'm going to stay here because it's a good job. And if I look towards the market, as Steve said, we have many possibilities right now. We have visibilities that we did not have in the past in the market. And this is what changed. People can actually say stop when they don't find the things that they want in our organization. And Paula, you mentioned about culture and marketing. Culture is essence and marketing is what can be perceived, but, well, what can be perceived is what we actually are. So marketing is like the heart of the brand. And the culture is what's going to allow you to provide that. So I think that this is a challenge for all of us. How are we going to walk the talk? How are we going to go from learning with our heads to our habits? And there was a Greek philosopher maybe who said that excellence is not a faculty of doing something. Excellence is the habit that we have to do something. So if we had 1 minute, what would you suggest to the audience to do tomorrow in the morning? That's one. When you start our next Zoom session, give 1 word on the check-in. How are you doing? I don't think this is going to take much time, but this is an icebreaker. It opens a conversation. Maybe you can say 1 word to open a conversation with your clients. Maybe, how are you doing? Or maybe saying, how are we doing? Because sometimes we talk about treating people like humans, but as leaders, we sometimes forget that we are humans as well, and we need to show our humanity, we need to talk about our fears, we need to talk about our insecurities, because this is how we really get connected with people. And it's not just about asking, how are you doing, but talking about how are you doing?
Yeah, also about that, talking about unconscious egos that we have. We don't talk about the inclusion and diversity, and I think that today it is a very strategic topic on the agenda, and there is a pathway that we are going through. It's positive change, but I think a big opportunity uh, to war is to work on the biases. Sorry, not the egos. Yeah, also experiment, make meetings without agendas so that people just talk, and showing this curiosity, a genuine will to actually get to know people is what gives us a lot of potential. I think it's an interesting experience, every so often, having a meeting without agenda. Pablo, I would recommend to show yourselves vulnerable with the people you interact with. We connect through vulnerabilities, and we take this mask of being super executives who have everything figured out. So vulnerability makes us connect heart to heart.
Oh,
What Pablo said.
thank you. Muchísimas
Thank you.
gracias a todos.